There is a moment when someone realizes they have been shaped by forces they never agreed to. Not through force, not through obvious control, but through invisible nudges so subtle that the person believed they were making their own choices the entire time. This is the territory of hidden manipulation mechanisms, and understanding them is not about becoming paranoid. It is about developing the clarity that separates authentic choice from programmed response. Most people never learn this distinction until the damage is already done. But there is another way. Hidden manipulation rarely looks like manipulation. It arrives dressed as connection, intensity, insight, care, or spiritual resonance. The most dangerous manipulation is the kind that feels like recognition rather than intrusion. A mind tends to lower its guard whenever something feels familiar, validating, or deeply understood. And this is precisely the moment when subtle influence begins to weave through the emotional field. Manipulation does not start with force, it starts with synchronization. When two emotional frequencies align, one of them becomes easier to steer, not through control, but through invisible nudges disguised as support, guidance, or love. This is why manipulation is not the territory of obvious villains. It is the territory of unmet needs, unconscious patterns, emotional hunger, and learned strategies that bypass direct communication. But here is what most people miss. Manipulation requires one essential ingredient to function. Without it, no hidden mechanism can operate. That ingredient is confusion. Confusion weakens the inner compass. A confused mind becomes a searching mind, and a searching mind becomes an absorbing mind. The moment the internal reference point becomes unstable, external reference points begin to feel like guidance. This is where the mechanism activates. First, create emotional fog. Then, provide the sensation of clarity, even if that clarity actually leads the person away from themselves. This is the essence of the manipulative dynamic. It replaces inner authority with external direction, not by force, but through subtle erosion of personal perception. Think about this. There is a moment in every manipulative dynamic where the target begins to doubt their own reactions. Something feels off, but not off enough to confront. Something feels contradictory, but not contradictory enough to reject. Something feels emotionally heavy, but not heavy enough to name. Manipulation thrives in this liminal space between awareness and denial. It is the region where intuition whispers, but the nervous system hesitates. And because the human mind is wired to avoid conflict and maintain harmony, it often chooses the path of least resistance: silence, compliance, or self-adjustment. Ironically, these are the exact responses a manipulative system relies on to deepen its grip. The first hidden mechanism is the creation of subtle instability. Not chaotic instability that triggers alarm, just enough to make someone question their emotional footing. One day warmth, the next indifference. One moment validation, the next micro-dismissal. The inconsistency is never dramatic enough to call out. It is delivered with surgical precision, tiny emotional contradictions designed to make the nervous system lean forward. Instability produces vigilance. Vigilance produces emotional investment. This is the heart of the mechanism. A stable person is grounded in their own rhythm. An unstable person is grounded in the emotional climate of another. And once someone is grounded in another's climate, they become predictable, controllable, and easy to influence. The second mechanism is selective reinforcement. When a behavior benefits the manipulator's narrative, it is rewarded with warmth, attention, or approval. When it does not, it is ignored, dismissed, or punished with subtle cues like withdrawal, silence, criticism, or sudden coldness. The person on the receiving end begins learning which versions of themselves receive emotional nourishment. And so the self reshapes itself quietly, not to grow, but to maintain equilibrium with the manipulator. Parts of the self shrink. Other parts inflate artificially. The natural identity dissolves, replaced by a strategic one designed to please. Hidden manipulation does not force compliance. It teaches compliance through emotional conditioning. It is like training an animal, except the animal is a human consciousness. Here is a question worth sitting with. How many times has someone adjusted their behavior, their opinions, or even their desires because of subtle emotional signals from another person? Most people cannot count. It has happened so many times it feels normal. But normal is not the same as healthy. Normal is not the same as chosen. The third mechanism is perceptual distortion. This one is particularly insidious because it operates so quietly. The manipulator drops microstatements that shift someone's perspective about themselves, others, or the relationship. You always take things too seriously. People don't understand you like I do. You misread things sometimes. You're being too sensitive. Statements like these seem harmless in isolation, but they act as anchors inside the mind. Once planted, the person begins filtering their own experiences through the manipulator's lens. Perception bends, memory bends, interpretation bends, and over time the manipulator becomes the emotional narrator of the relationship, deciding what is true and what is exaggerated. This is where internal disorientation begins to feel like a personal flaw instead of a programmed reaction. The fourth mechanism is emotional pace control. This happens when one person quietly sets the speed of emotional escalation. Too fast, and the other feels swept into intensity. Too slow, and the other feels insecure or uncertain. Manipulators adjust the emotional tempo to maximize dependence. They create momentum when they want closeness, through affection, attention, vulnerability, intensity, and then slow the momentum to create distance, confusion, and emotional hunger. This push-pull rhythm activates the same psychological circuits as addictive reward patterns. It keeps the nervous system oscillating between anticipation and anxiety. And once someone is caught in this rhythm, leaving feels like withdrawal, not liberation. The nervous system has been trained to crave the very person creating the instability. The fifth mechanism is the illusion of mutual insight. Manipulators often create the sensation that they see deeper than anyone else. They use language that feels profoundly accurate, almost mystical, to generate emotional intimacy. But intimacy built on insight is different from intimacy built on vulnerability. Insight-based intimacy creates admiration. Vulnerability-based intimacy creates connection. Manipulators favor the first because admiration is easier to control. When someone believes they are deeply understood, they become more open to influence. This is why many manipulative interactions feel spiritual, fated, or profound in the beginning. It is not spiritual recognition, it is targeted attunement. The manipulator has studied the target carefully and is now reflecting back exactly what the target wants to hear. The sixth mechanism is emotional mirroring. Humans trust familiarity. When someone mirrors emotional states, gestures, interests, beliefs, or even speech patterns, it creates the illusion of compatibility and deep resonance. Mirroring is one of the oldest psychological bonding tools. A manipulator mirrors not to connect authentically, but to gather data. Every mirrored detail teaches them how to shape behavior later. Mirroring builds attachment. Manipulation exploits attachment. Much of what people interpret as chemistry or soulmate connection is simply strategic resonance. The other person has become a mirror, and mirrors do not have their own light. The seventh mechanism is guilt anchoring. A manipulative mind plants small seeds of guilt to shape future behavior. You know, I only react this way because I care about you. If you understood me better, this wouldn't happen. After everything I've done for you. These statements create emotional contracts the other person never agreed to. Guilt becomes the currency of compliance. The more guilt someone carries, the easier it becomes for the manipulator to guide behavior with minimal effort. A single phrase can activate the entire guilt structure, and suddenly the person is adjusting, apologizing, or complying without even knowing why. The eighth mechanism is emotional decentering. This occurs when a manipulator indirectly shifts priority from the target's world to their own. Gradually, conversations revolve around their feelings, their problems, their interpretations, their needs. The target begins monitoring their emotional state, adjusting actions to avoid conflict or maintain harmony. Over time, the manipulator becomes the center of the emotional universe, and the target becomes an orbiting planet. Emotional decentering is the most silent mechanism because it feels like care, empathy, or relational effort. But true connection has balanced gravity. Manipulation has a single gravitational point, and everything else is pulled toward it. The ninth mechanism is selective vulnerability. Many manipulators reveal vulnerability strategically. They share pain not to connect authentically, but to create emotional obligation. Vulnerability becomes a leash. Once someone feels responsible for another's emotional well-being, they become easier to guide. This is why manipulation often feels deeply emotional. The emotions are real, but the timing is strategic. The manipulator knows exactly when to reveal weakness, exactly when to show pain, exactly when to appear fragile. And the target, moved by compassion, becomes locked in a caretaking role that benefits the manipulator indefinitely. The 10th mechanism is identity erosion. This does not happen through direct criticism alone. It happens through micro-doubts, repeated over time. Are you sure that's what you want? Maybe you misinterpreted that. You're being too sensitive. That doesn't sound like you. These statements seem normal in isolation, but when repeated over time, they create a fracture in self-trust. Once self-trust is weakened, external influence becomes stronger. Someone who doubts their internal world becomes dependent on external interpretation. The manipulator becomes the translation system for reality. The target stops trusting their own mind and starts trusting the manipulator's version of events instead. But here's where things shift. The most effective way to dismantle manipulation is not confrontation, it is clarity. Clarity dissolves manipulation instantly because manipulation relies on confusion. A confused mind is influenceable. A clear mind is immovable. The moment someone recognizes patterns instead of reacting to them, the entire dynamic shifts. Internal observation becomes the shield. When responses slow down, when emotions are processed internally before being expressed, when the mind stays grounded in its own rhythm, the manipulative pattern loses oxygen. It cannot survive in the presence of awareness. There is a moment in awareness work when someone stops interpreting a manipulator's behavior as personal. Instead of thinking, "Why am I not enough?" the thought becomes, "This is the pattern they're running." Instead of thinking, "What did I do wrong?" the thought becomes, "This is how they gain leverage." This shift is profound. It turns emotional entanglement into emotional observation. And observers cannot be manipulated. Only participants can. The moment someone refuses to participate in confusion, guilt, pressure, or inconsistency, the mechanism collapses. It is like removing oxygen from a fire. The flame does not struggle. It simply fades. The practical framework for recognizing hidden manipulation is simple. Observe the pattern, not the person. When someone creates instability, the mind should ask, is this instability real or manufactured? When someone offers insight, the mind should ask, is this insight authentic or strategic? When someone expresses vulnerability, the mind should ask, is this vulnerability genuine or designed? These questions alone neutralize most manipulative patterns. Because manipulation is not about truth, it is about emotional leverage. And leverage only works when the target is not asking questions. Imagine a moment in the future when someone tries to use emotional confusion or subtle guilt to influence behavior. Instead of falling into the old loop, the mind notices the pattern instantly. The body feels the shift, but the consciousness does not follow it. The discomfort rises and falls without attaching meaning to it. Suddenly, the pattern has nowhere to go. The internal radio stays tuned to its own frequency. That is the moment of real liberation. The moment when the mind recognizes that manipulation was never about intelligence. It was about awareness. And awareness has now taken the lead. At the deepest level, hidden manipulation mechanisms reveal something important about human nature. Most people manipulate because they do not know how to ask directly. They fear rejection, abandonment, or shame. So they use indirect routes to secure emotional needs. But indirect routes always cause emotional distortion. Authentic connection requires clean signals. Manipulation relies on messy ones. The wise mind recognizes messy signals without absorbing them. The wise mind knows that someone's tactic is not a reflection of their worth. It is a reflection of that person's internal fragmentation. And instead of becoming entangled, the wise mind chooses clarity, distance, and internal coherence. This is why awareness is the ultimate form of protection. Awareness does not require defense. Awareness does not require argument. Awareness does not require confrontation. Awareness simply sees through the mechanism, and the mechanism loses its invisibility cloak. What was once hidden becomes obvious, and what becomes obvious stops having power. The person attempting manipulation may continue the same behaviors, but they will no longer land. They will no longer shape. They will no longer influence. The target has become untouchable not through walls, but through clarity. If this resonates, if something inside recognizes these patterns from personal experience, the invitation is clear. Subscribe to this channel to continue exploring the hidden mechanisms that shape human behavior and consciousness. Like this video if it triggered recognition or if it named something you have felt but could not articulate. Share it with someone who needs to see these patterns. And in the comments, share your own experience. What hidden mechanism have you recognized in your own life? What pattern are you ready to dissolve? The conversation continues below, and your voice matters in this community of awakening minds.